So a little bit about Greenland. We've got about over 20 years of engineering software solutions expertise, staff of about 25, and quite a number of, and a growing number of partners that we work with as well to undertake our work, including a number of universities. We've got University of Alberta and University of Guelph are longtime partners. We're currently working on a new relationship with Queen's as well. We're specialized in water resources, municipal and environmental engineering, urban design, landscape architecture, and then the area that I work in is IT and decision support systems. We're based in Collingwood, Ontario, and we've got a strong emphasis on partnership building. And as I noted, we've got several ongoing and new partnerships we're working on. Talking a little bit about our value proposition, and I've tried to gear this specifically for the mining sector. And some of the things that are happening in this sector that are probably influencing some decisions that are happening in mining organizations. So investors are seeking high levels of transparency these days. New indicators are looking at environmental social impact associated with mining and greenhouse gas emissions. So those with demonstrated sustainability will be in a better position to access high levels of capital that are needed for mining. Mining firms need to be gearing up for the required reporting on greenhouse gas emissions and corporate environmental performance. We recognize that margins in mining are driven by the fact that prices for commodities are global market based. So your margins are based on how effective and efficient you can be in your operations, and that includes things like reporting and analysis and planning. So most data analysis work involves accessing many decentralized data sets and spreadsheets, hard copy, multiple sources, government departments, et cetera, et cetera. This can be very inefficient, costly, time-consuming, and often requiring specialized technical expertise in order to undertake the right kind of analysis. So our value proposition, we have a tool called Threats, lengthy acronym, the Healthy Rivers Ecosystem Assessment System. It's a multifaceted data platform. It allows for visualization, allows you to look at different types of charting, time series data. We can automate statistical analysis and trend analysis. It allows us to streamline reporting, making operations preemptive rather than reactionary, and saving a lot of time. It allows for better planning and insight and risk mitigation. And we've got data and applications from public sources that can complement private data and make the system work well for different types of applications. Our business model and onboarding. So just to be upfront, so Threats is not really an off-the-shelf software solution. We offer software as a solution. Our client-facing platform has a secure multi-tiered login system, and our clients are engaged with us to help define their needs, identify and incorporate relevant data, build custom modules and applications that meet those needs, and provide the right levels of access. Okay, so I'm going to get into a little bit of our case studies, show a little bit about what our platform looks like. So we'll start with some work we've done in the Alberta oil sands region. Threats is a great tool for narrating and storytelling. So I'm going to try to tell a little bit about some of the areas that we've applied it and some of the challenges those groups are facing. So this was part of a flow regime analysis work that we did on the Athabasca River. And this particular tool identifies locations where flows are being measured. It also identifies water takings and allocations. And in this chart here, we've built in an analysis that looks at what's known as an indigenous low flow index. So communities in the lower part of the Athabasca and what's known as the Peace River Delta, Peace Athabasca Delta, there's a lot of indigenous communities in this area. They need access to traditional lands for hunting and fishing and gathering to practice their traditional ways of life. And over time, their access to these areas has been increasingly restricted by lower and lower flows that make boat access and navigation more and more challenging. So we, using the data that's available, developed an analysis tool to be able to look at how frequently and how much change there is in terms of that level of navigation and accessibility, so that it could be used as a management tool to assist with helping to potentially better regulate and share that water between upstream needs and downstream needs. So we looked at long-term flow analysis, and we identified that there were, let's see if I can get a pointer tool here. We identified that there were significant trends showing that flow had been changing and in fact decreasing during critical times of the year over a long period of time. We've added tools to allow us to look at how daily flows compare against long-term normals that have been developed over decades of time. And this allows us to readily look through a historical period and find events that may have caused issues in the past, or be able to see what the possible cyclical currents of these things might be, and also to look backwards in time at climate conditions using our connected climate data to try to identify where some of those events might have originated from, whether they were the result of anthropogenic contributions such as mining or dam operation, or whether they were part of climate change or trends. This tool allows us to look at cumulative water takings, which obviously in areas such as Alberta has a significant impact on flow regime. So we can look at the number of permits that have been issued and the total volume of water that they account for. Moving on to our second, another one of our modules here. This is a tool we use for looking at flow regime on uncharted watercourses. So this tool uses a machine learning approach to generate a synthetic hydrograph for ungauged locations. Flow forecasting using weather forecast data is in development, and we hope to have something ready to launch shortly on that front. The intent will be that the user will be able to drop a point on a map, such as this we've done here, delineate a drainage catchment area and a flow trace that shows the downstream flow of that water course or location, and then generate a synthetic hydrograph depicting what the long-term flow at that ungauged location would look like. We can then generate statistics such as low flow statistics or even flood flow statistics. And then moving forward, we can apply existing conditions around in the vicinity of this location, couple that with weather forecast data, and predict what the extended portion of this hydrograph looks like, so that it can be used for planning and mitigation, and allow the user to make more optimal decisions around water use and conservation. This is a tool that is sort of coupled with that concept of flow prediction. We can use this to, with some cautious and with some caveats, identify areas that could be flown to flooding under certain types of hydraulic and flow conditions. So this is an example where we looked at Edmonton, and some of the map allows us to see some of the low points in that geography. Okay, our next case study, I'm going to look a little bit at some of our water quality and air quality data, and how that can be used in our system to support mining operations and other uses. This is, so one of our partnerships, we're working with the Gordon Foundation. They have a platform called DataStream, which is an amazing innovation. They're collecting and making data available across all of Canada. That data includes it's a constantly growing set of data, but it includes a lot of provincial data in addition to community-based monitoring data. And I believe they're also working on some federal data sets as well. So working with them, we access their data sets, and then we render them through our platform. And we provide a series of analytical tools to filter through that data, identify where there might be guidelines that are exceeded, and any trends in that data. A lot of this data we've been finding is sort of a little bit segregated. So there's, you might get a couple of samples in one location. We've addressed that by making it possible to chart multiple locations and time periods over in one chart, so that you might be able to see how water quality changes in different reaches of a river system or across different monitoring periods where there might be stations set up for a short period of time, but then discontinued. Air quality data is sort of similar, but anyone who's worked with air quality data knows that it's not straightforward. It's not as straightforward as just plotting at points on a chart. There's a lot of averaging periods that need to be applied in order to compare the data against water quality guidelines and criteria. So we've got some tools built for air quality monitoring in the Alberta oil sands area and downwind of those operations to look for trends and compare that data against guidelines. And that technology can be applied elsewhere as well. We've also linked in the National Pollutant Release Inventory into our arsenal of data sets in the background of this. So this is just kind of a quick snapshot of an application there where we've drawn a polygon around an area of interest, and we've aggregated the data according to a certain chemical parameter of interest, and it can generate some charts and analysis. And that can be coupled with some of your monitoring data to see whether there's a cause and effect relationship between releases and downstream conditions from air and water quality monitoring. Okay, and then lastly, in terms of our case studies, I want to talk a little bit about some modeling that we've integrated in here. Through our partnership with the University of Guelph, we've incorporated the SWOT, soil and water analysis tool, into Threats. This is a visualization system, and it's also a calibration system. So for research and projects, we use our multi-core calibration platform to calibrate very detailed large-scale models, such as this one that we've developed for the Lake Erie Basin. And then through Threats, we allow clients access to the model so that they can see what the results of those modeling scenarios look like. In this case, we're looking at phosphorus management in the Lake Erie Basin. This is part of an economic analysis we're doing on agricultural management practices, but it's got applicability for other industries as well. And what we can do with this tool is allow the user to compare results from a baseline scenario against different management scenarios, so that they can see in a time series fashion, as well as statistical and spatially, where those changes are having the most impact. We've incorporated a few analyses for looking at land cover change. We've got data from a few different decades, I think going back about 20 or 30 years. So we can run land use change analysis and generate some statistics. This tool also has a capacity to look at or compute changes in impervious study area. It can calculate density of linear infrastructure, such as roads, rails, hydro corridors, and things like that, and generate a habitat loss or habitat fragmentation index, which can be useful for reporting on those types of changes over time. So this is a kind of a sum up slide. So some of the benefits of threats: manage your data better across organizations. It's a web-based interface, so you can work with this data and custom analysis tools across your organization. Access data easily. We can automate reporting and analysis tasks. Access a suite of tools and data that are built to address a specific context by working closely with our development team and through an agile type process. Plan for regulations and transparency requirements. And of course, as anybody who collects data knows, it's expensive to do this, so you want to make get the most value out of it by not having it sitting on a server or in a filing cabinet somewhere. And ultimately, this will save you time and money and build value for your organization. And of course, you'll be working with an expert team who's built many solutions for different clients over time. Okay, that sums up our presentation.
All right, thank you very much, Trevor. Very informative indeed. Trevor, I have a question here from somebody from the junior mining space. And what they want to know is how does this application help with environmental assessments?
Okay, so well, this application is useful because for environmental assessments, you would need to tap into quite a number of different types of data sets. I'll give an example where this isn't exactly an environmental assessment, but it's a planning exercise where we've used this for doing assimilative capacity studies for wastewater discharge. So in this case, or in the case where we've used this, we can use threats to automatically or greatly automate the process of calculating design low flow stream conditions so that we can determine the dilution ratios necessary to discharge effluent. We can also use available historical water quality data to calculate baseline background conditions so that we can determine what the mixed concentrations would be once an effluent is mixed into the water course, and ensure that it doesn't create an impact. We can also look at, as I mentioned, things like land use change and things like that would be components that would go into an environmental assessment.
Yeah, and I had another follow-up question here that I was speaking to tailings monitoring. Could you just comment on utilization of threats in monitoring tailings sites?
I don't think I have a specific example of that, but I think there's a number of potential applications here where we could use threats to help in forecasting and evaluating river flow conditions. And this is useful for a couple of purposes. Understanding flow regime on water courses in proximity to tailings ponds can help you understand where you may be at risk from higher flows, and also release of water from tailings ponds, how they might impact water courses. So I think there's a few potential applications there related to tailings ponds from the flow regime perspective, and also, as I mentioned, you can use this for looking at background water quality, so maybe upstream. The data could be presented within the system, and then where you might have downstream monitoring in data fed into the system, we can set it up as a real-time feed. So you would be able to use this as a dashboard to identify maybe if there were any breaches or releases from those tailing ponds that need to be addressed.
All right, thank you. Another question we have here is, do you read data from the original source system live, or do you copy it periodically to your platform?
It depends on the situation. Some data sets are more open to a live streaming setup. For example, our water quality data that I mentioned coming through from DataStream, that is a system that we have real-time access to. So when somebody adds data into that system, it comes up readily through threats. Other data sets are not as readily used in that fashion. So it really comes down to what the data set is. But in the case of real-time monitoring data, if it were data for a client, we can certainly if that data is moving through a telemetry system to a cloud data set, we can certainly integrate that in real time.
Thank you for that answer, Trevor. Trevor, this question we have here is, you mentioned you aggregate data in some reports. Is it possible for a user to view and analyze the raw data as well?
The raw data? I think how best to answer that. So there's a number of ways we can use this. Another feature that we've added into our system that we use to work with clients it's a tool called Metabase, and we have an open source edition of it that is linked within Threats. What we do is we allow the user to essentially access databases that form the underlying architecture of Threats on the back end. So if you don't know if there's it forms an opportunity for us to work directly with the client, exploring the raw data, or at least the cleaned up data, I suppose, as it goes into a database. Then we can start to identify what kinds of metrics are you looking for? What would be most valuable to be able to see when you come in the morning? Or what are the charts and statistics you need to be able to put in a report at the end of the month that goes to to whatever regulator? We can work directly with the client and ensure that we're calculating those correctly. And Metabase gives us a bit of a sandbox, if you will, to experiment with how that data is processed and analyzed using simple SQL type commands. And then once we've done that, then we can build it into the front end of Threats so that it's more readily accessible to others in your organization rather than just your more savvy data analytics people.
Okay. Gotcha. Thank you for that answer. Trevor, the next question here is from Boris, and I want to maybe just rephrase the question a little bit. And maybe I'll ask the question in this way. What are the Threats sort of flexibility when it comes to speaking with other applications? So I guess in other words, is there a mechanism for the Threats application to be able to communicate with other software applications in terms of sharing information or receiving information?
Yes. There's always some conditions to that. I guess one thing an example that might come to mind is that the question might come from the perspective of is a tool like, for example, Whiskey, Kister's software for data management would be one example. So in the past, we've run some experiments where we've set up keyless calls to Whiskey, and we're able to render that data inside Threats. So that might be one example that might be relevant to the person asking that question. I guess we could explore that a little bit further if it's more involved with the functionality and integrating functionality between different applications. That can be a little bit trickier, but not to say it can't be done. It's just a matter of understanding better what type of application and what type of integration might be of interest.
Okay, all right, thank you for that. Maybe we've got one more question here, and the question is, what is your client engagement process? So how do you onboard a new client?
Well, I did have a slide that sort of relates to that, but perhaps a little more detail on that. I don't need to go back to it, but I guess our onboarding process would be to, I think we provide a customized service. So we would start off by, engaging in some conversations, trying to understand what are the needs and what are the data sets that are available. We would then proceed to come up with a bit of a strategy for accessing data sets and determining the level of processing that they needed to be done, and then identifying some of the key metrics and indicators and types of charts and graphs and maps that would be useful to the client. And then at that point, we would come up with a service agreement, and we would begin moving forward with developing that application. And wherever possible, where we have applications and modules that have already been built that might address that user's needs, we can discuss providing access to those tools and data sets as well. I hope that answers that question, but maybe there's a bit more to it. I can address that at a later time.
Yeah. You know what? Would you have one more minute to go? Did you want to squeeze in one more question, Trevor?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, let's go for it. Okay. All right. Well, one question here is, a lot of companies are always looking at the business case when it comes to, adopting anything new. How would you sort of maybe speak to that? How would you be able to evaluate what the business case is for utilizing threats?
I think, as I noted in the beginning, there's data analytics is it's a really fast moving field. Getting people who are really good in this space is challenging and expensive, and we're trying to kind of create, we address a niche requirement in this space, I think. So I think the business case is that being able to access data from both public sources and your own private data in one space, being able to streamline some of that analysis process and visualization process so that users with different technical abilities within your organization can visualize and work with that data readily and provide reports and to other stakeholders. I think that's a really critical element of this, and being able to do that quickly and cost effectively. I think that's the real business case here. But I don't know. I've spoken to so many people who say, we don't have the data to go into something like this, but that's kind of the value, is that we bring a lot of the data from public sources with us, and the functionality as well. So every time we add new modules and functions, our users have the ability to access that functionality as well. So I think it's an evolving system, but it's always increasing in value to the users.
Awesome. All right. Okay, with that, wraps up our presentation. Trevor, I would like to thank you and the folks over at Greenland for the presentation. And to our guests, we will be in touch with you shortly with a copy of this video and a copy of the slide deck, and also with Trevor's contact information so that you can follow up with informal information. Trevor, thank you again, and we look forward to hosting you again.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.